Welcome to another edition of Fantasy Football Come True. I'm your host, Rod Funderburk. I'm joined by two of the best in the business, and they are also part of our panel, and they're the part of the panel that makes this show go. First of all, I want to say a good evening and hello to my brother from another mother, Brian Foster. He's hailing from Charlotte, North Carolina. Brian, how you doing, my man?
What's up, man? I can't complain. Ready for an exciting week two, man. Week one was fun, so ready to jump back into here.
And that's what we're about to do. And our second expert panelist is my brother from the same mother and actually father as well. That's Big Ron Thunderbird. And he is hailing from Raleigh, North Carolina. Ron, how we doing today, Daddy-O?
Man, I'm hanging in there. Happy to see you two guys, man. I was a little under the weather with all the rain from the hurricanes and the tropical storms and stuff like that, but I'm really excited to see y'all this afternoon.
Good deal. Well, as long as you stay away from the coronavirus, we don't mind you being under the weather. Other than that, we're good to go. It is a little rainy out there, so everybody get your rain jackets and your umbrellas today and tomorrow. Well, gentlemen, let's go ahead and get started. As everyone knows, this is Fantasy Football Come True. We're affiliates of Tobacco Road Radio. And on last week, you guys made some really excellent picks. And you gave some great insight on how you choose a fantasy lineup. And I made sure I kept up with both of you guys' lineup. And Brian, I got to be honest with you, man. You put it down last week. You put it down on your lineups, bro. How about doing me a favor, Brian? Chime in here. Remind us who you chose last week and how you actually ended up making fantasy football come true for yourself last weekend.
Okay, so last week, my main lineup consisted of Lamar Jackson, Boston Scott, Antonio Gibson, Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, Brown from Baltimore, Marquise Brown, Zach Ertz, Alvin Kamara, and the Washington defense. So a lot of these plays we hit on last week, guys. If you listen to the show, we talked about Antonio Gibson. He didn't perform very well, but at $4,000, he allowed me access to get to players that I really wanted to get to. We talked about watching the injury report. So when Miles Sanders got ruled out on Sunday morning, Boston Scott was a lock for me at 4,800. I knew he would get the majority of the snaps, the majority of the plays there in Philly. So I had to go with Boston Scott. He was a free square for us on Sunday. He also didn't really perform well, but again, allowed me access to some other high dollar players that we liked. We highlighted Devontae Adams last week. Yes. And if you had Devontae Adams on your squad last week, you likely made some money last week. So I had Devontae Adams at 7,300. He was an absolute steal. There's been a lot made in the offseason about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers not adding any offensive weapons to help him out. So Devontae Adams in a COVID year where teams haven't been able to practice and gain chemistry and things of that nature. We like continuity, and we have with Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, we had that. And at 7,300, he was an absolute steal. Ended up with 44 DraftKings points. So my total lineup ended up scoring 164.6 DraftKings points. As we talked about before, we're aiming to get 150. 150 normally gets us to the cash line, so 3x your salary. And I turned a 50% ROI last week, so that's a good week. That's by no means an expectation for every week. So I don't want to get people. Don't get your expectations too high. You know, if we can churn a 50% week, that's great. But we're gonna have some 0 weeks out there. So anytime we can get those 50%, 100%, 2x weeks, we love to see it. But 50% is a good week, so I was happy with that.
Definitely, Brian. 50% return on your investment in fantasy football is awesome, my man. Now, you mentioned something in what you were just saying now about the cash line. For some of our new fantasy listeners out there, would you just explain real quickly what you were referring to when you mentioned the cash line?
Yeah, so there's mainly two types of games in DraftKings. There's a cash game and there's a tournament. So in the cash game, all you have to do is finish 50% of the field. So if there's 100 people in the field, if you're in the top 50, you cash. If it's a $5 game, it's a $5 game, you get $10.
Okay.
All you're worrying about is finishing the top 50. You don't care about finishing. If you finish first or 50th, if it's 100 people, you all get $10.
Oh, okay.
So what you're shooting for there is guys with high floors. So you want guys that are solid. You're going to get your numbers. You don't really care about high ceiling games. You just want guys that are really solid in your lineup. So and then there's tournament games. Tournament games are your millie makers, are your really big high dollar games where only about 20%, most of the time, only about 20% of the field gets paid out. And you get more money, of course, but it's a very difficult game to finish in the top 20%. And
so you got to really be an expert in the tournament style. So, if you're a beginner, I definitely recommend the cash line because as the old saying goes, you don't have to be the fastest one to outrun the bear. You just got to make sure that you're not the last. But in this case, you can't be the bottom 50. Good deal. Right. Appreciate you, Brian. Thanks for that, sir. Man. Now, Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you, Big Daddy. Now, you didn't perform quite as well as Brian did last week, but you didn't have a terrible week by any stretch of the imagination. So tell us how your fantasy football ended up last week.
So I'm going to count last week as 0-1. Okay. And the reason is I overthought it. And that's something that you can easily do. When you have all this new data coming in last minute, you get the injury report, you get the chalk report, i.e., the plays that 50% of the field or 30% of the field is doing, and it's giving you value plays, it kind of makes you greedy. And I got greedy last week. I started thinking about lineups last year where Christian McCaffrey, although he was $10,000 last year, he still won you if you put him in your lineup. And I told you guys last week I wanted to pay down at quarterback. That's my strategy. I told you I wanted to pay down at areas where I could. That's my core strategy. But when I saw Scott come in so cheap, and I saw also that Gibson chalk so cheap, I said, man, I want to reach for the sky and go with some high dollar guys like Christian McCaffrey. I wanted to go ahead and get Lamar Jackson at my quarterback lineup. And actually, though, that's where I messed up last week in my cash games. And I'm really a cash game player. That is where I make my bread and butter over time. I don't really set up for the tournament GPP games as well. But I gave the folks a great combo, a wide receiver quarterback combo last week. I said Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams were the two best doing it. And if you're doing GPPs, you had to go for it. I'm not a GPP guy. But because Aaron Rodgers, they did so well, it made me have to wear the Green Bay Packers this week, man. He's making me eat my words. I wish I would have done it, baby. But hey, that's lessons learned. I also sometimes need to throw a GPP out there just for the sake of throwing a GPP out there. That's what it's about, right?
That's definitely what it's about. And Ron, we appreciate you for being straight up about it, telling us how not to overthink the game because that can happen. And definitely, you had Aaron Rodgers marked last week. That was one of the first ones you guys brought up. There were a couple other players that we also discussed outside of your picks last week that included Russell Wilson with the Seahawks.
He hit it.
He balled. Teddy Bridgewater with the Carolina Panthers, and also Tom Brady, who's down there with the Tampa Bay Bucks. Now, which of those latter two quarterbacks, which they're going to meet this weekend in a heck of a battle between the 0-1 teams, how do those three quarterbacks perform this week? You guys think as it relates to football? Ron, I know you like Russell Wilson, so can you expound on the week he had and how you think he might come up this week?
Man, he had a great week last week playing the Falcons, the dome team. And it was really just set up perfect for him from the beginning to the end. I told you guys also DK Metcalf was also a great value play, and DK Metcalf paid off. I think he was under $6,000, maybe mid 5,000s last week. And he paid off. Russ paid off. The running back game paid off. I read an article this morning about how this year may be the first year that Seattle prioritizes the pass while Russell Wilson as a quarterback. So for the future, rest of the season, that's something you might want to consider. This week might be tough for them. They're going up against New England, going up against the best coach in the game. I'm not completely certain how that's going to play out for Russ. But in Russ, we trust. In Russ we trust.
Not NC State a long time ago, but I ain't gonna go there. That's a whole different deal. So look, I'm gonna jump over to Brian right quick. Brian, you want to jump in a little bit on how Teddy Bridgewater, how his first start for the Carolina Panthers ended him up in fantasy football last week?
Yeah, man, we talked about Teddy Bridgewater last week. We talked about the Carolina defense, man, and or lack of a defense is what they have actually. So that's setting up Teddy Bridgewater to have a great year, man. Whether that's in garbage time or whether they're leading the game, but his defense is going to put him in a position where he's got to score points. And last week I mentioned Teddy Bridgewater and DJ Moore. DJ Moore didn't do so well for us last week, but I had the quarterback right, had the receiver wrong. Was Robbie Anderson balled out last week?
That's right.
But the process was correct. The results didn't go how we wanted. The process is the Carolina Panthers are going to be a target for us every week because their defense is not going to be good, and they're going to be playing from behind a lot of games this year. So they got Tampa Bay this week. You got an angry Tom Brady. Hey, you can go right back to Teddy Bridgewater this week if you like. Also, Tom Brady sets up very well as well against, again, like we said, a terrible Panthers defense.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting matchup this week, the battle of the 0-1s, but somebody's got to come away with a win. All right, fantasy ballers and listeners out there, coming up next, our expert panelists, Brian and Ron, will be giving us one of their true lineups that they plan on using this week in live fantasy football competition. But before that, our panelists are going to school us a little bit on a money-making strategy. So as soon as we come back from this quick break, we'll get right into it. All right, welcome back, fantasy audience. I'm your host, Rod Funderburk. I'm here with expert panelists Brian Foster and Ron Funderburk. Gentlemen, there are a great deal of strategies that can definitely enhance your performance in fantasy football. But there is one strategy that I would like for you to kind of educate the audience on, and that is that quarterback wide receiver strategy out there. You guys want to kind of expand and talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so what Rod's referring to is a lot of times you see in the industry, they call it a stack, where you'll have a quarterback and a wide receiver from the same team in your lineup. And that strategy is typically used for a GPP, as Ron mentioned. That's a guaranteed prize pool. That means that there's a guaranteed prize that DraftKings has said, hey, we're going to pay out this amount of money no matter how many people enter. So whenever you hear GPP, that means guaranteed prize pool. So, and those games are different from cash games where in cash games, you just care about getting in the top 50%. But in a GPP or a tournament, you want to try to get to the top because that's where all the money is. So in order to get to the top, we like to stack our quarterback with a wide receiver. Because generally that means you only need one thing to happen. You need the quarterback to throw a touchdown and you get double the points. So if Matt Ryan throws a touchdown to Julio Jones, I don't get 6 points for the touchdown. I get 12 points for the touchdown. Nice. So what you want to do there also is we like to call it a bring it back. So bring it back means I'll not only take a quarterback and a wide receiver from the same team, I go look at the opposite side and I say, okay, if this team is going to score a lot of points and their quarterback and number one wide receiver or even number two wide receiver are going to put up points, then the other team on the other side is obviously going to have to try to play catch up and put up points as well. So a common stack that people in the industry like to use is you take a quarterback, you stack him with his number one wide receiver, maybe his number one tight end, or even his number two wide receiver, and then you bring it back on the other side with the other team's number one wide receiver. And this strategy has proven to be successful over the years in fantasy football. So you want to take a look at that and where that's feasible and where it's viable based on salaries and team totals. That's a viable strategy if you want to look at winning a tournament.
Okay, and that's the quarterback wide receiver stack is what that strategy is called.
Yes, sir.
Beautiful. That's for our listeners out there. Ron, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add to that. And Brian gave you a great stack last week with the Carolina Panthers and the Raiders. And the one way that you can find a stack that Brian mentioned last week is that you look at team totals, Vegas team totals. You want to look for high point totals. And then you also want to look for games where the matchup or the spread is going to be close. So for this week, there are definitely a couple games that are high totals. Dallas versus Atlanta, they're looking at 53 points. between the two. And then Dallas is only expected to win by 4.5 points. So
Yeah, we're gonna win by more than that, though. So don't listen to that. Go ahead, Ron.
but that is definitely a great setup. Not necessarily saying that's the stack you want to take, but that's definitely a great setup to look for, to say, hey, I'm looking for teams that score a bunch of points, and then I want to have a stack where one of my players is always going. So if you have, like Brian said, 2 players on one team and a bring it back player, you're always making points. You're always making money on that particular game. The only thing I might add is that sometimes you might not want 2 wide receivers and a quarterback. You may actually want a quarterback, wide receiver, and a running back on the other team in case one's the leading team, or maybe you basically want to isolate the what they call the route tree, or you want to isolate the core play of those 3 players together if you have a combination, and you kind of want to balance out price as well. So that's something to think about. Last week, one of the game stacks, great game stacks, like we said, was Rodgers, Adams, and then if you brought it back with Thielen, you killed it, So
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you guys both for that education, especially for our listeners out there who might be a little bit new to fantasy football. But based upon what we're learning now, I would love for you guys to kind of give your opinion on some of the matchups that are going to be coming up in the play this week for fantasy football. Brian, would you like to start us out on who you think could be a favorable matchup this week?
Yeah, so we've talked about a couple, man. I like Tampa Bay, Carolina. I like Dallas, Atlanta. But I'll go a different route that we haven't talked about yet, man. I'm gonna go with Houston and Baltimore, man. So this Baltimore squad, man, is tough, man. They got Lamar Jackson, the MVP, reigning MVP. The guy's pretty much unstoppable, man. And we saw what Patrick Mahomes and the boys did to Houston's defense last week. The Houston defense is struggling. It's not very good. So I'm looking at this Baltimore team. They're going to score a lot of points. As we talked about, it's the highest total on the slate. We got 53.5 total on this game, guys. 53.5. And like I said last week, the biggest indicator of a quarterback's performance over time, Vegas has told us, it's their team total. And there's a reason why Vegas makes a lot of money. They know what they're doing out there. We don't have to go against them in fantasy football. We can use it to our advantage and use them as a baseline. So I like this Houston-Baltimore game. You got Lamar Jackson. I know he's expensive, $8,200. He's very expensive. But I don't even have to play Lamar Jackson if I want. I just want a piece of this game because it's a 53-point total. I got to have some of this game. So I can look elsewhere. I can look at Marquise Brown, who's only $6,200, and I can bring it back with a little mini stack there with Will Fuller, who's $6,300. So I get the 2 number 1 wide receivers on those 2 teams. And if they're telling me this game's going to score 50 points, I got to believe those 2 wide receivers on those teams are going to have a big portion of those points.
No doubt. No doubt. That's all right. Well, I appreciate that strategy. So I'm sure our listeners are going to be checking that out, and they're going to have their eyes on that Baltimore-Houston matchup. Ron, how about you? Do you have a matchup in mind this week that could be favorable?
I do, but before we leave that Houston-Baltimore matchup, make sure you check out Andrews. Lamar Jackson only has eyes for Andrews. He can only really throw straight down the middle of the field. And I'm not dissing Lamar Jackson with that, but if you watched his gameplay last year, he likes crossing routes and throwing in the middle of the field. That is where he excels at. But sorry about that. I hate
that would be a great stack. That's a great stack for you right there.
That's right.
I hate getting technical there, but that's
okay. Next time we might have to make some of our fantasy listeners pay for that bit of information. Go ahead, Ron.
Oh man, I can't lie. There's so many games that I really really like this week. Some are a little expensive, but again, I'm the value guy, and I'm going again. Get my hands in the cookie jar again, but I'm going with different players. It's the Green Bay Detroit game. Is sets up for a great stack. You can play this 2 different ways. Given that Green Bay is going to be putting a lot of pressure on Detroit's secondary, Stafford's going to have to throw, and Stafford is only coming in at $6,200. That's not a bad setup. You had Galladay that still might be hurt from last week. Marvin Jones is coming in at $5,700. That's not bad. And if you bring it back with somebody cheap, you can bring it back with Lazard, or you can even go up to 8,100 and still get the core of the Green Bay Packers route tree with Adams. To me, that is a great game stack. You know, I read last week where I saw a meme where they had the coach for the Detroit Lions looking real sad, knowing that Adrian Peterson put together most of his production last week. So I think Matt Patricia is going to find a way to game plan and have other pieces of his puzzle come together against Green Bay. That game is coming in close to 50 points, and also I think it could be another shootout. That's what I think.
I think you could be right. And you guys, those are great matchup expectations. And gentlemen, you know, we're getting down to the end of the show. And this is the part of the show where the rubber meets the road. And I know you guys participate in multiple fantasy leagues and all kinds of competition. And you both have done very well in previous years, and you're continuing to do so this season. I want our audience to know that this is the show that wants to see our fantasy football listeners out there get paid. So what I want each of you to do is take a minute and tell us who you have your money on this weekend and why. Ron, let's start with you. Who you got your money on? Who you putting the money out? As they say, put your money where your mouth is. Well, who are you talking your money with?
Put your money where your mouth is. I love it. Hopefully the listeners can see the screen share in the background. Don't see everything. This is, but I wanted to build a lineup for cash games for you all this week. And there's some guys that I really like that are great value guys that can really help you get the rest of your lineup that you really want. And I know I'm a little biased, but I think if you start with Nyheim Hines as one of your running backs for next week, you'll be in a great position. Nyheim Hines is coming in at $5,300. The starting running back, Mack, is hurt. He's going to be out for the season. They're also playing against Minnesota. Minnesota did not look well last week against the pass. And I would argue with Phillip Rivers at the quarterback, this is a guy you want. Phillip Rivers has had great chemistry with his running backs ever since he's been in the league. And I would argue that Nyheim Hines is going to continue that tradition, and he's coming in real cheap this week. Another person that you could continue your lineup with is Darius Slayton, coming in at $5,000 if he's healthy. I think he had some issues this week, but he is a core of the Giants route tree. He had 9 targets last week, and I'm really excited about him. And there's some other guys, but I don't want to take up a lot of the microphone time right now. But I'll pass that on over to Brian. But I'm giving you, if you can see in the background, I'm giving you my first look. This is my first look lineup. And of course, it changes as new information emerges or as you have an opportunity to think about different things. At the beginning of the week, I also had Snell, but it looks like the starting running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to be Connor, is going to be able to come back and put some snaps so that makes that lineup not as attractive. But Snell was coming in at $4,500. That would give you an opportunity to pay up for some other guys, but we'll see. But you see where I'm at right now, and I'm gonna stop the screen share here.
No doubt. Thank you, Ron, for that information. Listeners, you heard it. Ron has running back Nyheim Hines of the Colts, and he also gives a big shout out to wide receiver Darius Slayton of the Giants. That is where some of Ron's money will be going this week. Brian, the man who was coming off an awesome week, where's your money going this week, my man?
Man, so I can't let Ron put y'all out there like that, man. So I gotta disagree with him. We're gonna keep it real here on the fantasy football. We're gonna keep it real, man. If you did not see Jonathan Taylor for the Indianapolis Colts play last week, I encourage you to please Google this man and please watch the tapes of Jonathan Taylor last week. As Ron mentioned, Marlon Mack did go down last week. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the game, the vet, Nyheim Hines, got a lot of the work. Phillip Rivers trusts the veteran running back. He likes him in there. But the talent of Jonathan Taylor will not be denied. You're hearing it right here. At $5,700, I'm telling you to spend that extra $400 and don't play Nyheim Hines get up to Jonathan Taylor. Please, please, I'm begging you, fantasy football community. This is the guy that you want to play, Jonathan Taylor. So there's that. But I'm gonna give you one more bonus one. But I had to cover my man a little bit.
Ain't nothing wrong with it. I love it. I love it.
That's awesome.
Jonathan Taylor is going to be a monster this week. So I want to take a look at this Kansas City and LA Chargers game. So we have the Chargers playing Kansas City. The Chargers are one of the slowest playing teams in the league. They like to play slow, like to run the ball a lot. They want to play. They have a great defense. They want to play great defense. They want to keep the game slow. But the Kansas City Chiefs, nah, they're not gonna let you do that, brother. They're not gonna let you do that. Because Patrick Mahomes is coming out and slinging that thing and making the rock throw and throwing that rock all over the field, man. So I gotta go look all the way down. Ron talked about value. We like value. We want to get these value plays in there to allow us to spin up for these big horses. So man, if I look at Big Mike Williams at 4,200, he came in last week injured. They didn't even know he was gonna play last week. The man had 9 targets. They played against the Bengals in a 13-16 game. I'm going to tell you, this game against Kansas City, it's not going to be 13-16, bro. Mike Williams got 9 targets last week. They got Tyrod Taylor back there, not the most accurate thrower. So you got Keenan Allen, who's technically their number one, but he's a more timing-based, a more accurate, a great route runner, that type of receiver. But Tyrod Taylor's going to be trailing this game. He's going to need big plays. And his big play guy, he's going down the field too at 4,200, is Mike Williams. And he's locked in my lineup. Cash, tournament, whatever, it doesn't matter. You see last week he had 9 targets, 69 yards, had 4 catches. He got you 11 points last week. And at 4,200, he's an absolute steal. He's an absolute steal, guys. I love Mike Williams this week.
Brian's got 11 points for 4,700. 4,700, 11 points.
He's 4,200. He's 4,200 this week.
Okay.
Yeah, he's $4,200 this week.
And also they scored 16 points last week, Ron. Do you think they're gonna need a little bit more than 16 this week against Kansas City?
I think that's a great pick. I think that's a great pick for the league.
Well, they're definitely gonna need it. Now, listeners, you heard it right there from Brian. He's got Mike Williams in his lineup. That is where he is putting his money at. So keep an eye on it. I'll tell you what, fantasy football ballers, we have reached the end of our show. And on behalf of Brian Foster and Ron Funderburk, I'm Hot Rod Funderburk. So make sure you tune in next week to Fantasy Football Come True, the only fantasy show that puts money in your pocket.